This is Karen with NewClevelandRadio.net. And today we are bringing you the first official podcast of the Bully Blog podcast. So, how did we come up with the Bully Blog? Well, we came up with it because I met Dave Rosenberg a couple of weeks ago. We did an interview regarding the movie The Reunion. And after watching it, I knew that we had to continue with this conversation. And interestingly enough, Dave said, yes, I've been considering a podcast. So it was as easy as that. So, Dave Rosenberg, welcome to the Bully Blog podcast here on New Cleveland Radio. And introduce yourself to our listeners.
Yeah, so my name is Dave Rosenberg. I'm originally from Brooklyn, New York. Grew up in New York and Long Island, lived in the city for a while. Went through kind of a major episode of my life when I was kind of traumatized as a kid, when my friends turned on me. You probably would call it bullying. And then about 10, 15 years later, I ran into the person who I felt kind of spearheaded this in Union Square Park in New York, and it just freaked me out. And so I told my two friends, and Dinh was one of them, who you'll meet in a minute, and my other friend Andrea, who were actor friends of mine. And I said, and they saw me and they saw that I was still freaked out. And Dinh said, you have to write about this. This is a great story. And Andrea said, you have to confront this guy. And so for the next five years or so, we were working on this script, working on the story. I ultimately did confront this guy, which maybe we'll talk about. And I moved to Los Angeles, became a middle school teacher. And then some years later, we went back and made the film through, a higher power in the universe, bringing it back to us. So we kind of had our own reunion of sorts, the three of us, after 10 years or so. And here we are.
So, Dinh, my question to you is, why did you tell Dave he had to write the story?
Hi, Karen. Nice talking to you today. I am a very sort of intuitive person. So when I meet people, what I do is I listen to what they have to say, but I also pay attention to corny, but the energy that they give out. So as Dave was recounting his encounter with this bully from his past, there was just some energy that was emanating from him that felt very visceral, very immediate, and it felt like it was a very important thing in his life that happened to him. And because, in my opinion, we go through life very censored, very filtered. We don't let things affect us, and then we don't express it out. So for me to see that happening in real time and seeing this energy, such a strong energy that's coming out, I just felt like he needed to deal with it somehow. And since he is an actor and he is a writer and a director and a producer, that's when I recommended, hey, you got to write this because you're a good writer. And this is a way for you to explore what's happening while it's happening.
So, Dave, how difficult was that? I mean, you had kept this private for a long while.
Yeah, I mean, certainly when I was a kid and it was happening, I just didn't feel like, I just didn't know how to express myself, and or I didn't feel there was anybody really safe to express it to. I mean, I had, a few friends, but, most of them kind of turned on me. My mom was just, my mom was always there for me, always took care of me, practically loved me. But I don't know that she was able, I don't know that she's a very nervous person. So I think going to my mom, I think it would be hard for her, and I did go to her and she did offer to reach out and go talk to this person or this person's parents. And I was like, no, it's just going to get worse. It's just generally how a teenager, or preteen will respond to that. Making the movie has been incredibly hard. I mean, I want to say it's the hardest thing I've ever done. It probably is. I mean, other things have been really hard too. Teaching has been really hard, but it's a really hard process. You know what I mean? That's why, movies are really hard to make. And good movies are even harder to make, and great movies are even harder to make. So I think we made a really good movie, but it was really hard, and it tested all of us. And I think it, as we talked about with Andrea, I think it brought up all of our best stuff and all of our worst stuff, and we all had opportunities to face each other and face ourselves. So in that sense, it was great, and it was healing, but it was really hard.
Well, I was able to watch the reunion. And right now it's playing at several film festivals, and one coming up in just about a week in New York, which I'll have you talk about in a second. But when I watched it, it wasn't what I expected. And I shared this with Dave once before. I don't know what I was expecting, but I was in such awe the whole time I watched it. And I cried because these things are happening all around us, not just to teenagers, but to adults. Um, and if we don't stop this kind of behavior, um, we're just going to keep hurting each other. And I'm so glad, Jen, that you told him he had to write this story, because I'm sure that helped him cleanse yourself of a lot of feelings that you had harbored.
Yeah, and also I think because of and 2020, I think, brings it out to the forefront for all of us. The whole racial justice movement, that and the isolation that we all experience because of the pandemic, it all sort of asked us to listen to ourselves and to challenge what is it that we had been hiding, if that's the right word, or kept undercover. Um, and it's funny you say that, because it is up to us now. And I think because of 2020 and the whole all that happened in 2020, it sort of challenges each of us to say, we have to say something, right? If something is not right, we do have to say something. And it is as small as this, and I'll give you a very small example in my own life. Like, my name is Din, and it's a very simple name to say, Din. But I cannot tell you how many times people have missaid it, even though it's written very clearly Din. And the other thing, a pet peeve of mine that I had, but I never sort of expressed it, was people would always misspell it. And I know it's a very small thing, but it is an identity thing now, right? It's my name.
Yes.
So if I were to spell Dave, Dafe, that's not his name.
You got it.
As an English teacher, I wouldn't like that.
Right, right. But beyond being an English teacher, it's your identity, it's your name. So before, I would just let it pass. I would say, oh, it's a Vietnamese name, so it's okay if people misspell it or mispronounce it. But now I am less tolerant of that, because it is then and I know people can interpret it differently, but for me, it's a form of, the term of the day is otherness, making me feel like an other. And it is a little bit of a form of bullying, right? For you to just, you've seen my name written down, and if you don't pay attention enough to write it correctly, then there's an issue there, that's a power play that's happening maybe. So now I'm very, very sort of, not militant, but I will point it out to people. Say, hey, that's not how you spell it. Hey, that's not how you say my name. But I think you're right, Karen. It is up to us now to sort of not educate, but at least to point out if something is going on that we don't like, that makes us feel uncomfortable. And with the Me Too movement too, right? If there's something's going on that makes you feel uncomfortable, speak, explain to the other person. If they don't change their behavior, like you say, then it's an issue.
Absolutely.
If they change their behavior, then we can move on and talk about something else.
Well, it's interesting. We all take ownership of our name, where we live, our background. And when somebody chooses to change it for us, that becomes difficult. Now, many of us don't, like you said, we don't say anything. We don't want to embarrass the other person. My last name is Hale, Hale. I cannot tell you how people butcher it when you go into some place and they say your name, and they don't even say like Hale, like the rain, or Hale, like Nathan Hale. They just called me something else. And so my husband and I have gotten around to using weird names when somebody asks us for a name. And they'll usually get that really weird name right, but not my last name. So, maybe I should be a little bit more forward and just say, you're going to learn what my name is. Um, but that's important to each of us in a different way. But
Right.
I do understand. And as we talked about before we went on air, um, sometimes we say things because we think it sounds cute or it's the norm, and people just, it's not for them. And so instead of getting mad, and I'll use this as an example, Dan, if, you know, I pronounced your name wrong, how would you approach it? It's the first time I'm pronouncing it wrong. Would you just tell me nicely how it's pronounced? Or are you going to come right at me that, hey, that's not my name?
It depends on the situation, of course. If it's someone that I've known for a long time, I actually would get mad at them.
Yes.
And I would go, come on, how many years have we known each other? And yet you cannot say my name or even spell my name correctly. Because what it does, it challenges my understanding of my relationship with that person.
Right.
Because I care, right? If you are my friend, I care and I pay attention to everything you do, and I pay attention to how you like your name. Like Dave is Dave, it's not David, right? So I pay attention to those little things. So if you, so it sort of challenges my understanding of my relationship with the other person. So ironically, with people I know, I get more angry, and people I don't know, I might be a little bit more forgiving, forgiving, and I would try to sort of correct them gently, uh, and make little jokes along the way so that it's clear. But yeah, similar to the story in this movie that Dave wrote, uh, and it's all dependent on how people interpret the event. Some people can watch the film and ask the question, which the female character in the film asks the lead character, like, it has been 10 years. It has been since high school. That's a long time ago. Why are you still holding this event in your life? The answer is because it was his life, and because it's affected him. And so we on the outside cannot really put our expectation onto the other person and say, hey, get over it. It was 10 years ago. Or get over it, Din. It's just a name. So they say Dean instead of Din. What's the problem, right? But it's all individual. How we have lived our lives, our life experiences affect how we react to things that happen to us. So if bullying is happening, if you may say, oh, it wasn't bullying, he's just calling you funny names, he was just joking around. But to the other person, it's bullying.
Absolutely. So one of the things I'm hearing you say, and Dave and I have talked about this before, that even though it happened, and now it's more than 10 years ago, but in the beginning, when you suggested he write it, it was 10 years, to say, well, that was 10 years ago. Well, a lot of things happen in our life previously, and maybe it didn't make as big an impact when it happened. But the way things are going at the present time may bring those events up. And we ask ourselves, if that didn't happen, things might be easier. And I know that's one of the things that my son is going through. If what happened to him when he was in high school had not happened, where would he be today? Would he be further ahead than he is now? Or because it happened, is he where he is? And that's his biggest struggle. And I can understand that. So, Dave, to you, um if that hadn't happened to you back in high school, do you think your life would have been any different going forward?
Oh yeah, I mean, completely different. I have no idea what it would have looked like. That was such a big event in my life. Before that, I was a popular kid. You know what I mean? Like I was a popular kid. When I was younger, I was a happy kid. I also had stuff at home with my stepdad. So I just felt like I got beat down when I was like 12, and that happens for a lot of kids.
Right.
Like I said, I teach middle school now, so I see it all the time. And it doesn't have to be a huge event like that. It's so much going on in a kid's life when they're going through that transition and puberty and all that stuff. So it's really hard. But yeah, I mean, that changed everything for me. I sort of went from being really confident to just like I see a picture of myself when I was like 12, and I was just shut down, terrified, and frozen for many years. And it was really acting, I think, that largely started my life. Doing radio actually in college, and then acting, and then this film was just a very cathartic experience. And I learned a lot about myself. Starting to stand up for myself, speak up for myself, become more active in my life, but also learning about my own defects of character, my own faults, because I was very clear that I was the victim and this person was the bad guy. And I was the victim and my stepdad was the bad guy. But to me, I only grow up. I'll speak for myself. I can only grow up if I see my stuff. I don't want to be an endless victim, because that's not a place I want to be. That's just being resentful my whole life. So, I have to own my stuff and go, wow, that bully is in me. I can be aggressive. I bully with money. I bully with entitlement. I bully with ego. You know what I mean? I bully with my communication skills. I bully with manipulation. All those things. I have to look at the dark side. And that's why I wear the symbol. You know what I mean? This symbol is really important to me because it's about being a whole person, and that's hard. It's hard to face oneself. It's hard to face, the enemy. It's also hard to face oneself.
Well, and the reality of it is, if we've been bullied, and I talked about this on a couple of other shows, um, I felt like I was bullied in elementary school up to junior high. And I walked around crying, feeling like I was on the outside looking in. And, was it going to be my turn? And in junior high, we moved out of state and things were different. And I found a group of friends, and I was fine in junior high and high school. But I kept thinking, all those people that I wanted to be friends with in elementary school, they rejected me. But what I realized afterwards is the group was rejecting me, but individually they were accepting me. So when I complained that I was being bullied, I was told no. And I had to look at it differently. Now, years later, I look at it. Okay, I wasn't part of the club, but I was part of each of their lives individually. And that made me look at it a little differently. Um, and I bullied myself because I thought they didn't want me. Well, then I'm going to go do something else without you. So we got to be careful, with the words that we use in our reactions to them. So, as a
It's
middle school teacher, Dave, and you and I talked about this offline, um, when you walk into the classroom and you see that the kids are, whispering or something odd is going on, um, do you ever think that maybe somebody in the classroom is being bullied or picked on?
Um, they don't have to whisper it. I can see it. You know what I mean? They usually don't whisper if they're bullying. So, but I mean, they'll speak under their breath. I mean, I'll give you an example. The other day, somebody was sharing something, speaking or sharing their work or something like that. And some kid just started laughing or something. And I just stopped it immediately because I'm really clear now. That's not going to happen in my classroom. It's not going to happen in my classroom. I mean, I can't be the police officer for the whole school, but we're going to set a precedent that we don't do that. And I made it very clear without trying to humiliate the kid who made the comment that when we tease or we bully, it's because we're in pain and something's going on with us. And we want to take that pain and put it onto somebody else. And I said, let's not do that. Let's take responsibility for our own stuff. And if it's hard to sit with, I understand, but that's your challenge. That's your challenge. Okay. So you got to kind of nip that stuff in the bud and go, this is how we do things, in this classroom. And it's not a part of it. And it happens, it's going to be dealt with.
So, Dan, in the movie, you really seem to challenge Dave quite a bit.
Right.
So,
It,
was
it
that
sort of relates to what you were talking about, Karen, just before Dave spoke. There's an issue of how we react to things and how we carry things with us. Um, and that's what I think the movie is trying to articulate, is that there are two opposing forces, two opposing uh, interpretation, if I don't know if that's the right word, but two opposing ways of looking at an event. So my character Danny is, he's a Buddhist monk, and his philosophy is more about looking inward as opposed to looking outward. The answer, and he says it in the film, is the answer is from within. It's not from without. Yes, that event happened to you, and that person did something to you, but how you've carried it and how you've let it affect you is based on you. So the Danny character sort of challenged Dave's character Ricky by just asking him, look within, find peace from within, because peace is not going to come from outside. Peace does not come from this other character. Um, and the film is it's great, and it's sort of nuanced and intuitive in that sense, that it makes us all ask the question, right? Who is responsible for our happiness? Who's responsible for us moving forward in our lives? And for Danny, the answer is you. You yourself is responsible, no one else. Because, and during the writing process, Dave and I and Andrea talked a lot about this, is when someone does something to you, they rarely will remember it. You will remember it because it affected you very viscerally, but to them, it was just an offhand comment or an offhand physical act. They don't intentionally are not trying to necessarily, maybe sometimes they are intentional, but most of the times they're just doing it out, like Dave said, out of their own anger or their own issue that's going on with them, and they don't recognize how it's impacting you. So if you go back and ask that person, hey, do you remember what you did to me 10 years ago? They're going to say, what? 10 years ago? I don't remember what I had for breakfast yesterday.
exactly?
So that's the what's the movie is trying to sort of deal with, is just those two forces, asking the character, like, who is it that responsible, really? And if things happen to you, how should you deal with it?
And then just to speak to the other force, because Andrea's not here, and it would be lovely at some point if the three of us could talk about it, because that's the crux of the story. And I think that's what was so fun for us, for me certainly, was that sort of nuance of like, there is no answer. You know what I mean? They've been trying to figure it out probably since the Greeks and before that, to how you deal with conflict. But that is a conversation we need to have, is how do we deal with conflict? Because, again, sometimes with bullying in schools, they go, well, just if somebody's bullying you, just punch them in the face and then that's it. It's like, that's a little bit too simple.
Yeah.
It's a little bit too simple. So conflict resolution, right? And it can't always be just walk away and say nothing, because then we sit with resentment and then we get sick and we implode. So how do we deal with conflict resolution, not with our fists, but with our mouths,
Right.
with our communication, right? And so the other side with Andrea was like, no, if somebody messes with you, you take them down, right? If somebody's coming after you, you deal with it, and you don't sit with it for 10 years, because you wouldn't have sat with it for 10 years if you would have clocked the guy. So that is an option. You know what I mean? It's not the option we always talk about in elementary school or middle school, but every instance is different, and we could put moral implications on anything, but at the end of the day, it's how you feel. Somebody would say, it's messed up that you punched the person in the face. You're a bad person. You go, well, I'm fine with it. I thought it was the right thing to do, and I live with it okay. He was coming after me. I hit him. That was the end of it. So it is nuanced, and it's a great conversation, and it's not just guys. And I've been really surprised how women have responded to this film. That's been really beautiful, to see that women really respond to the film as well.
Well, it's interesting because we've already done 2 individual shows, and one woman that I interviewed, she's been bullied her whole life because of her weight. She happens to be slender. And to this day, people just will come up to her and they'll say the rudest things. And, I never thought of that as being bullied. Heavy people usually get bullied. I didn't think of a thin person being bullied. And it resonated so well with me that people will pick on you for any reason. And it's about them, not
Right.
not you. And once you really start to understand that, the problem is though, Dave, you were brought up by a mother that probably is about my age, and our upbringing would have said to you, just walk away. Go find another group of people to be friends with. In fact, that's what my mother said to me. And I'd say, but they're sitting in my classroom. How am I going to get another group of people? But that was usually the answer, remove yourself from it. But by removing yourself from it, as you said, Dan, we're not getting any healthier. In fact, we can be making ourselves more sick.
Right. And it would perpetuate because the other person will continue to say things or do things that they think is okay, when in fact it may not be okay to someone because of his or her personal experience. Because the same thing issue happened with me. It's like people always tell me, yeah, you're so skinny. And in this country, I guess it's a compliment. But in Vietnam, actually, when they say you're too skinny, it just means that you were malnourished. So it is not a compliment. But yeah, and people make fun of you all the time about everything, right? Your hair color, your skin color, your eye, the shape of your eye, the accent that you have, how short, how tall. So it's all these little things. And I think it is not fair. It's not fair for people to say, please call me she as opposed to he, right? And it doesn't impact you. I'm not asking you to change your identity, but I'm asking you to recognize my identity.
Absolutely.
And that's the conflict that and the other thing too is we may be a little bit off track here, but I don't actually support the militant approach to this issue either. It's like, before every meeting, people is gonna hate me for this. Before every meeting now in some our organizations, they would tell you to identify yourself. Like, my name is Dinh. Please call me he, she,
right.
He, him. And I sort of refuse to do the second part because I
agree.
say, it's not me opposing to you wanting to do that. If you ask me to call you he, him, I will do that. If you ask me to call you they, them, I will do that. I will respect that. But that issue is not in the forefront for me.
Totally agree.
So therefore, I don't want it to become a sort of, because my family escaped Vietnam, which is a communist country. And in a communist regime or an authoritarian regime, everyone has to raise the red book. Everyone has to say the right thing, say the same oath, right? And my family escaped that. So we came to this country for a very specific reason, which is freedom, which is corny, but it is freedom to walk around without having to carry any form of ID on me, without having to say the right oath, without even having to stand during the national anthem, right? Because that's the freedom of this country. But I know I got off track there. But yes, I will respect you in how you want to identify yourself and your self-identity. I fully respect that.
Well, and I have to agree with you because, when I'm in a meeting, my name is Karen, and that's how I want to be referred to. Okay. And you can take it from there. I know this is sort of a new thing that has been going around for the last couple of years. And I agree with you, Den. You have to respect the other individual for what they want. The same way when I introduced Dave on Alicia's podcast, I gave him the very formal name of David and did not mean to do it, but it came out. And Alicia, who is, she sits on my shoulder. And the first thing she said was, "Excuse me, Dave, do you want to be known as Dave or David?" And
Right.
then I thought, oh, okay, I made a mistake. I'll know from going forward. So it's okay if you make a mistake if you can learn from it.
Right.
I think just a few things is I love what you guys are talking about. You know, like, Dan, when you were talking about your name and that, you know, we can look at that politically or socially or what have you, but it's also personal. And what I felt you getting at was like, I want to be paid attention to. You know what I mean? I pay attention to you. I'm listening to you, but I want you to see me. That makes me feel valued as a human being. So on a personal level, it's just about us seeing each other, right? Us seeing each other.
I think the movie does that too, because in the movie, what Dave does, so he's a very good writer anyway, but the way he does is he dealt with the bully character by giving the bully character, a story, a background, right? So that you give a little bit of his side of the story, who he was, where he came from, all the challenges that he's dealing with. Because he too wanted to be seen, right, Dave? He wanted to be recognized. And his way of doing it maybe was to lash out and wreak physical pain on someone else. But that he was crying out for attention too. And I think that's what art is, and I think that's what movies are, and poetry and music. It's all about self-expression for me. It's all about expressing who we are, who I am as an artist, who we are as people, as a culture. And all we're saying throughout all the millenniums is, listen to my story. Let me tell you my story. And I would like you to remember me by my story. And my story is composed of where I'm from, what's my name, who's my family, who are my friends, and what I did in my life. And those are very basic human desires, is to be known, to be seen, to be heard. And if the other person doesn't feel that, then there will be problems and issues. It could either be them acting out violently against someone else, or someone would do the reverse and they would just draw in and they harm themselves, and so that's what films does. And that's why I said write it today, to go back to the beginning of the conversation. Like, write it, because otherwise you're going to hold it in, and that's not good.
So Nyack, New York is having a film festival, and the reunion is going to be shown, and you all are going to be reunited. What do you want people to get out of the movie when they watch it?
Well, first of all, just logistically, it's actually Wednesday night, so it's in a couple of nights. It's 9:45 Eastern Standard Time in Nyack, New York. So if you're in the New York area, please come. There's still tickets available. If you go to thereunionfilm.com, you can see our trailer, see what we've been talking about, at least see our trailer. But if you're in the New York area, please grab a ticket and come and see us, come and say hi. Also, all of our social media stuff is on our website, so you can check that out. It's so interesting is when I first started writing the movie, and when the first incarnation, the first reading we did about 5 years into it, was really about confronting the bully. You know what I mean? It was really a revenge fantasy. And I think at that time it was about like, confront your fear, confront your bully. Let's inspire you. Rocky, Karate Kid, like those type of movies that I grew up with and loved. But I think we needed another 10 years. And we were all like, why didn't it get made at that time? We couldn't raise the money. We weren't getting along. We weren't producers and all these things. But I think it came out at the right time, because that next 10 years was really about the inward journey, right? And looking at ourselves, right? And that got put into the movie. And it really, that's, I think, what separates this movie from a typical revenge fantasy, or a typical just, protagonist fighting the antagonist. And that scene, I think, is very powerful, Din, where we do see the antagonist speak to his story. It probably is the most powerful scene in the movie for me. So to come back around to your question, I think it's about healing. And our current president has used that word, healing. That makes me very excited, because to speak to what Din spoke to, what we went through in 2020, we need a healing, right? Not to be like a reverend or a priest or whatever. We need a healing. We do. You know what I mean? Because we're putting all of our stuff on each other. We think the other is the enemy, politically, socially, racially. We need to look at ourselves. You know what I mean? We need to be able to express our pain to each other without it being violent and hatred. I need to see what you've gone through. You need to see what I've gone through. And once that happens, and I do a lot of that kind of work here in Los Angeles, healing circles, men's circles, all types of stuff like that. And when people are able to express themselves and express what's going on for them, they don't have a need to attack the other. Like you were saying, Din, people just want to be heard. People want to be seen. And once they're heard and seen, then they can hear and see you. You know what I mean? So we need healing. We need conflict resolution. We need forums and spaces where people can do this kind of work. So I hope when people go see the movie, they go on this journey and they ask that question: what would I do in that situation? Who's that person in my life? Was it a bully from my past? Was it my dad? Was it an ex-boyfriend or an ex-girlfriend? How would I confront that situation? Would I attack, right? Would I run away? Would I freeze? Or would I find some sort of conflict resolution, right? Would I forgive and accept? And then ultimately, how can I go through a healing of that sort and maybe have some sort of catharsis?
Well, as you talk about healing, it's conjured up a lot of different thoughts in my head. Times when I felt I was bullied, which I hadn't even thought about in years. What I want people to understand is that sometimes when you just see a movie, read a book, listen to a podcast, it's going to bring up things from your past that maybe you have not talked about. And you need to find a safe place to do that. And I really encourage our listeners to allow those feelings to come out and cleanse yourself. Because if you don't, you're bullying yourself. You're keeping yourself down. And for those who have not seen the reunion or not going to be in Nyack, New York, which I was going to try to surprise you guys and show up. And my husband looked at me and he said, "And exactly how are you going to do that with your schedule?" And I said, "Oh, I can do it. It's not going to happen. So I'm not surprising you." But when do you think this movie will be more available for all of our listeners to be able to watch it?
Well, that's a great question. Thank you for that question. I had forgotten about that. So now if you do surprise us now, then it would be a really big surprise. That was not coming. And by the way, I'll humbly say that Cleveland was the first festival to reject us. So it's very exciting to talk about the festivals that accept us as we talk about bullying and rejection. But the first festival, Karen, to reject us was in fact Cleveland. So
that hurts.
Cleveland, I forgive you. You've got
rejections make us stronger.
Right, exactly. Movies coming to you from the last couple of years with COVID and everything. But we are very close to distribution. We have 4 offers that have come our way. We're having conversations about which fit we feel is the best, because that's ultimately, what I think is most important, which is the best fit. We will be on the platforms very soon. Which ones will be determined by the distribution and the distributors approaching those different platforms. We are going to do our own theatrical release. So in the Midwest, if you want to see this movie, we will be taking it to the Midwest. We will be taking it to a few theaters in New York and Los Angeles. So we're very excited about this next phase that's coming.
Well, and what I want to tell all of our listeners is that Keep listening to the podcast because you'll get more information. But it will give you an opportunity to dig deep inside yourself. And we want our listeners to be part of these future podcasts too. You know, where are you coming from? Are you the bully? Were you bullied? Um, and even the bullies have to find comfort in facing what they've done, and they can change.
Because we're all a product of, yes, nature, but nurture is a big part of made us who we are. So I think it's important for all of us to understand and recognize that who we are sometimes was not of our own making. It could have been from other influences or sources from outside. So there is always room and always a place of forgiveness, to forgive yourself, for whatever you have done, and allow other people to forgive you. But that won't happen unless you acknowledge that something happened. And that's what the movie is. And I just want to make a real quick plug for the film that, if you get a chance to watch this and when you're watching it, aside from it being a story about Dave's life and Dave's story, I just want to do a shout out to Dave that because he single-handedly almost put this film together, that it is a piece of art, in how the movie was made, how it feels, the sound, the music, the imagery. It is a piece of art, and if you watch it, if you get a chance to watch it, you will completely see Dave on that screen. Like I watched when I saw the first final cut, I was like, that's Dave, and that's what every artist strives to do is to put himself in the work of art. And Dave has succeeded in doing that. I've mentioned this to him already, but he succeeded in doing that. And so if anything else, that you get from the film, just rest assured that you will see a piece of art. To be corny about it, high-minded about it, but
I appreciate that. Thank you, Din. And you are a huge part of this, and you've been through this for 20 years. And, there was a lot of people that helped out making this film. I very much did not do this single-handedly. I was maybe the driving force at times, but we had over 90 people. If you look at the credits, small independent film, $250,000 SAG low-budget film. We have over 90 people, probably over 100 people that contributed to this, in various different ways I couldn't even get into. I do want to say, we do have a bully blog. We are now the Bully Blog podcast, which is very exciting, but there's an actual bully blog. So if you want to tell your story of bullying or being bullied or seeing bullied, you could do that on our website, thereunionfilm.com. You can email us if you want to start a conversation with us. That's how you can do it through me, maybe also through Karen. I also just want to say, Din, it's been so awesome having you, man. Karen, I've been talking to Din for years about you are so smart. And we've had these discussions politically for years. I want you out there, man. I want you to be like a governor or be in politics. As you've seen, he is so eloquent and fair, in his interpretation of things, and just sees things with a perspective that, a lot of us don't. So it's really exciting for me. I kind of wonder the effect that the last couple of years have had on you. I think we probably don't have time to get into all that, but I kind of see it the way that you're talking about speaking up, and it's no, it's time to speak up. So I'm just glad that you were here. And I just thank you, man. Thank you for being with us.
No, I'm very proud of this film. I'm very proud, and I'm excited for people to see it. I think it will, like you say, Karen, it will contribute to the conversation, and it's something that is worthwhile. Sorry, guys. Sorry, listeners. We sound like we're just patting our own backs, but we're really not.
No,
because we are very critical. Like Dave and I are very critical in our movie watching and what we like and we don't like. So if I did not like this film, even though I was involved in it, I would let you know. But it is I'm proud of it. It's something that is put out into the world that is contributing and not subtracting.
Well, I said in the beginning, it's not what I expected, because when I saw all the artistry in it, I knew basically what the story was, and I was I was distracted to some degree because I love the artistry, but I also knew the story was about Dave, and I was confusing Dave with Ricky at the time. And so I had to go back and watch it a second time, which I'm glad I did because I got so much more out of it. And I got to see the differences between you and Andrea. And that was like, I don't know if I have two friends who are that really polar opposites.
We are in real life too. So,
so what I'd love to do after NIAC is let's get Andrea on with the two of you, because I think our listeners are going to see a different dynamic and, you know, how Andrea deals with bullies. You know, one of the things we learned about Andrea the other day when he did the podcast with us, and God love his two little boys. They are adorable. They needed to be part of the interview. And I loved how he integrated them in, and how Alicia and Dave just like, you know, hey, they're here. That's wonderful. And that's what we should be doing with everybody in our life.
Yeah.
So
I love it. And Karen, I love your idea of let's start bringing the listeners in. If there's any way to do that in real time, great. If not, just let's start bringing them in, as it feels like this is a growing conversation.
absolutely.
And, you know, I think let's have the listeners be heard. And I think that's a great idea to have Din and Andrea and myself. Be careful what you wish for.
Be fair. Yeah. Well, the other thing too is this film was, like Dave said, is an effort of a lot of people involved, but it is a community project. A community-made film. I mean, we shot it in our local neighborhood of Union Square. Dave and I used to live there, actually. So it's a community project. So to bring the community in, and that's why I'm not surprised that Andrea and his kids joined the podcast. But that's the mentality that we had, was let's do this as a community, as a group. And it's not a studio film. It's not a studio film.
No.
It's a community film, really. Everyone was so generous with their time, talent, and energy, and their patience, because filmmaking is, like Dave said, is very challenging and difficult. And we are new at this. We're new at this, so we are very grateful, everyone. And you know, we apologize if we did something or said something that offended anybody. But in the heat of making the film, you know. All we can do is try to recognize that and own up to that. But at the end of the day, it's a community effort. So bringing the community into this conversation is right.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to get it posted out there, encourage everybody, get it out on the reunion website as well. That would be terrific, because I'm sure there are going to be people at the NIAC Festival that are going to have stories to share too, and especially after watching the film. So I want to wish you both a great day. I wish I was going to be in New York with you, but you know, I'll be there in spirit. And I know everything that you have in the works is just going to be tremendous. So thank you both, and we'll talk soon. Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Karen.